Flash here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman, and our guest is Sarah Shourd. She is now free. She must find it unusual to be described now as, and will forever be known as, the American hiker. How does that feel?
Well, it's accurate. I mean, we were hiking, but the first time we found out about it through a letter, and when we were in prison, we were pretty amazed. We were like, the hikers? Okay, well, that's true.
She is one of 3 American hikers. She, her fiancé now, Shane Bauer, and friend Joshua Fattal were taken by Iranian soldiers, and they were imprisoned for the next 14 months. She has been freed. Shane and Josh have not. So you're taken ultimately to the Evin prison. Talk about your time in captivity, where you were kept, where Josh and Shane were kept.
Well, the first 2.5 months, we didn't see each other at all. We were in complete solitary confinement. That was while the investigation was ongoing. And at the end of the 2nd month, that's when my investigator told me that the investigation was going to be put on hold. And I asked why, and he said, well, it's come from a higher up, from my boss, and he said that that our case had become political. And I asked him what that meant, and he said, well, it means that this is something bigger than you, and it may not really matter if you're innocent or not, because this has become political. And at that point, that was month 2, they never questioned us.
You were kept in a cell, 5 by 10 foot cell?
Yeah. Yeah, the first month we switched to a different area of Evin, but in both places I was in complete solitary confinement, and so were Shane and Josh. And we only saw each other a few minutes after begging and pleading and crying constantly. They let us see each other a few minutes.
They were together?
No, not the first 2 months.
Oh. And how did you keep your sanity?
Well, my favorite quote about prison is that prison is not hell the way that a lot of people imagine it, fire and brimstone. But there's very little heaven there. And I don't know what's worse, a place, like hell, or a place with no heaven. And I think the constant struggle of staying sane in prison and in solitary confinement and keeping your hope alive is just to find enough heaven inside yourself or inside each other to get through the day. And that's what Shane and I and Josh, we did for each other as much as possible. I've never had to tap into my internal resources as much as I did there.
Did you have books?
In the beginning, no, but they slowly increased. Towards the end, we had enough.
And then you saw them, what, an hour a day in a courtyard?
Yeah, half an hour increased to an hour. In the last month, it was 2 hours.
And you got engaged there?
Yes.
To Shane? How did that happen?
It was a surprise. Sometimes Shane would come out to the outdoor area alone. Josh would stay in his cell so we could have time alone together. And he did that. And I remember I was having a particularly bad day, and he said, oh, there's something I want to talk about. And I said, I hope it's good, because I can't handle much today, And he said, it's pretty good. And he asked me to marry him. I made engagement rings out of string, and it was, in the circumstances, quite romantic. Are you
wearing it now?
Yes, I am. I won't take it off until Shane is free and we get maybe other ones to replace them.
Talk about how you came to be in Syria and then taking that hike. Where did you grow up, Sarah?
I was born in Chicago, and then my mother and I, we moved to LA, and then after high school I moved up to Berkeley, and later went to college at UC Berkeley. And
that's where you met Shane?
Well, he's a little younger than me, so he went later. We weren't in college at the same time. But we met, even before we started dating. We were both peace activists, and we were organizing protests and different actions against the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Where? In Berkeley?
San Francisco, Berkeley, yeah. And so Shane and I always had a lot in common politically. And several years later, after he came back from studying in the Middle East, in Yemen and in Syria, we met again and started dating. And all throughout our relationship, he always told me stories about the Middle East, about what an amazing place it was, and how generous and kind and accepting people are, and persuaded me that it would be a good idea, that I couldn't really understand the beauty and diversity of cultures in the Middle East without immersing myself in it. I was very willing to do so.
What was Shane doing in Yemen and Syria? What was he studying?
Arabic. Yeah, so that he could become a journalist. When he was 18, he was traveling in Europe, and he decided kind of spontaneously to go to Turkey and just fell in love with the region. And ever since, he's been going there.
And so you decided to go to the Middle East.
I got a job teaching English. I was an English teacher before with immigrants in California for several years. So I was able to get a job, and we really had the experience of our life. We were welcomed into a very diverse community in Damascus of artists and intellectuals, people from all over the world and all over the Middle East, Palestinian refugees, Iraqi refugees, and it was just an incredible experience. I really never felt safer or more welcomed anywhere in my life than I did in Damascus. Like, sometimes I'd be walking home at night, and a man would follow me, and if I yelled out, 20 people would come out of their houses, you know, to help me, even if it was late at night, something that wouldn't happen in my city, you know? And there's just like an incredible generosity. And
did Ahmadinejad, the Iranian president, when you met him, ask about your past, ask about your activism, Shane's and Josh's?
Yeah, he did, and it was part of the evidence that I gave him that he promised to hand over to the judiciary of our innocence. And yeah, he already knew a bit about our past, about our friendship with Tristan Anderson, the young man that was shot by the Israeli military while protesting. And
talk about Tristan for a minute. In fact, when we had your mother, Nora, on, she also talked about, because she came with you and Shane to visit him, is that right, once in Israel?
Yeah.
We have done a number of programs on Tristan Anderson, the California activist who was photographing one of the protests in the West Bank and was shot by a tear gas canister.
Yeah.
You saw Tristan afterwards. You visited him in the hospital?
Yeah, we did. Shane and my mother and I, we were all in Damascus. My mother had only arrived a few days before for her first trip to the Middle East. And when we heard about Tristan, we just knew we had to go. And it's a difficult trip to take from Damascus, but there was no hesitation. And that was the first time I'd ever been to Israel-Palestine. And we were only there for 4 or 5 days. We spent the whole time in the hospital with Tristan, and it was a very scary time, and we were very grateful that he pulled through. And in prison, it was one of the most difficult things for Shane and I, not knowing how Tristan was doing, because his health was still very precarious before we were arrested. And once on the Iranian news, there was actually something about Tristan, and we were so grateful just to see that he was okay.
So is Tristan able to speak?
Yeah. I haven't had a chance to speak with him yet, but I hope to soon.
The president knew about all of this, the Iranian president.
Yeah.
Tell me a little about Josh, your friend.
Yeah, Josh and Shane were really good friends for a long time. They lived together in Oakland. And when I started dating Shane, we went to Aprovecho. That's the intentional community NGO that Josh was teaching for.
Which is where?
Southern Oregon. And we went there several times. It's in the middle of the forest. It's a beautiful place. They have chickens and ducks and an amazing garden. Josh is just a phenomenal person. I cared a lot about him before prison, but in prison we became, best friends for life. And Josh helped me through prison in just so many ways. He's a beautiful, selfless person.
How do you help each other through prison?
We came up with a million ways to try to, brighten our days and maximize the little time we had together. I would often come out to prison in a very bad state of mind.
Out to the courtyard where the three of you could see each other?
Yeah, out to the outdoor space. I would be waiting for hours, pacing and just like desperately in need of human contact. And when I would come out and see them, I would often just have tears streaming down my face, or sometimes I would be really, withdrawn and not very communicative. And they were always able to draw me out and get me to talk about what was going on. I'd just be like, I'm having a bad day. Every day is bad. And they came up with so many ways. We sang songs together. We always held hands and looked into each other's eyes. And we constantly talked about our future and all the things that we wanted to do with our lives. Really, I've just never had such a close bond with two other human beings. I mean, with Shane, he was already my closest friend and my partner, and but now Josh is in the same position.
How did you leave them? And was it hard to make that decision to go, if in fact you were making any decision? What did they say to you? What did you say to them?
Well, it was really very difficult and disappointing because all of our fantasies about our liberation were together, holding hands, walking out with our heads held high. And now for me, just knowing that they're still there and that their pain in a lot of ways is invisible. Everyone sees me looking pretty good and together because I'm 10,000 times better than I was when I was in prison. As soon as I walked through those doors, I just felt better than I had since before this happened. There's kind of this instantaneous rebirth, that happens. But at the same time, what's going on inside of me is extremely painful, because just the way that I felt that my pain was so invisible that no one ever sees what prisoners actually endure. There's never a camera or media inside the prison walls. I know that only I can really see what Shane and Josh are going through. That they're still in this cramped cell. They have no idea when they're going to get out. They have very little sunlight, very little time where they actually leave the room. And
so what are you doing now to try to get them released? How are you leading your life? What are you calling on people to do?
Well, I'm doing everything that I can to not allow them to separate us. All throughout prison, that was one of the most difficult things, is we fought so hard to stay together. And we eventually won more and more time together. And this, to me, in a way, is like the greatest separation. They have, by freeing me first, of course I'm grateful for it, but at the same time, it's very painful to be separated from them. And the only reason that I can enjoy this, that my freedom, is that I know that everything that I'm doing can contribute to theirs. So I'm just tirelessly advocating for them in the media, and I write them every day, and I can only hope that they get my letters. I'll never know until they get out if they actually get my letters.
Why were you held in solitary confinement?
They said because there was no other prisoner that was right for me, a good fit. I never really got a good explanation, but I think it's because I was American, and they said there were no other Americans.
Do you have any regrets?
Regrets? No. In prison, those kind of emotions torture you if you don't let them go. And so I really had to find peace in myself that something bad happened to me, something unfortunate, and it wasn't my fault. People get in car wrecks, and they're the victims of the situation. I don't find it productive to regret what I did, because I really had no indication that what I was doing would in any way put me in danger.
What do you think would most possibly secure their freedom? What do you feel people can do? What makes a difference?
Everything that people have been doing has made a difference. Every day I learn more about what's been going on and how many people around the world really support and believe in our freedom and our innocence. I heard about this